Vidar is dying. Helpless at the hands of a terrible beast. Every day brings a new story. But one thing is constant. Everyone in Vidar will die.
Welcome to the Phat Games podcast. This week we have a very special guest, my personal friend, Dean Razavi of Raspberry Games. Do you want to say hi to everyone, Mr. Dean?
Hi. Yeah. I guess technically formerly of Raspberry Games as of a few weeks ago, but we can get into it.
And we will talk about that, yeah. And we are welcoming our wonderful co-host back. Say hi, Mr. G.
Hello, everybody.
So where were you last episode?
If people don't know, I don't know if you mentioned this.
I did not mention
I actually got shingles, which is kind of like the adult chicken pox. So I actually found out that I was talking to my brother, and he told me he gave it to me when I was a kid. So what happens is the virus just kind of stays dormant in your system, and it just rears its ugly head when you're well into adulthood.
So the shingles and chickenpox are actually part of the herpes family of viruses.
Yes, they are herpes.
So your brother gave you herpes when you were a kid.
Got the herpes, yep.
It's exciting.
Happens to the best of us.
So yeah, you would think I would have gotten it at the wave pool in Edmonton, but no.
Well, yeah, you're right. That's kind of gross though.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So Dean, you crazy son of a gun. I'm not going to swear because a lot of that happened in the last episode.
Oh man, I didn't. Did I miss out on a lot of swearing that happened last?
It was a good episode. You should go watch the recording.
Damn.
Unedited.
I missed out on all the good stuff.
It was fun.
I can't make the same promises here.
You can swear all you want.
Good,
we're not
thank
monetized yet, so you don't have to worry about it. So Dean, you're like a crazy lawyer and also a teacher and a game developer and a producer. And I'm going to guess you also a curator of large mammals.
Yeah,
tell us about your past. Why did you end up in game development when you were a lawyer before? Because that seems like a bad financial decision, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and it is. I don't think anyone would dispute that. Yeah, I had like growing up, I had made a lot of kind of like game light things. I had experimented a lot with the Warcraft 2 and the StarCraft 1 map editor. Like those games, like those are used to like ship with these like pretty substantial editors for their RTSs, and you could do things like events and triggers and all this kind of stuff. And my dad was actually a programmer, got like a master's in computer engineering like way before that was like really a common thing. So even when I was growing up, I had a little bit of exposure to like my dad would teach me how to make like small games in like QBasic. And so I always kind of had it in the background, and it was always a nice hobby for myself, and it was just kind of, kept as a hobby. when I was practicing, I started to poke around more with RPG Maker. Started to actually like make games that I thought were kind of fun. And at one point, I had said, you know, I might hire an artist for this. Like, maybe actually like make some assets for this game. And my husband's like, how much is that going to cost? I'm like, I don't know, like $20,000-$30,000. Like, who cares? And he was like, are you selling this game, or is this just like a hobby that you're going to spend $30,000 on to like keep?
Lots of people spend a lot of money on hobbies.
And I'm like, I don't know what selling a game. Selling a game, that's silly. You don't do that. Like, that's not a thing that people do. And then I started to investigate and was like, what does that actually look like? And by the time that like things started to get a little bit of traction with Vidar, I was feeling pretty burnt out at work. I like the timing worked out nicely where I had just wrapped up like several major cases, and I was like, you know what, this is it. Like, this is where I'm gonna actually take the plunge. And since I had Vidar that I was working on and was like planning on selling, I was like, here's the transition for me.
That seems like it was far less emotional than I feel like it probably actually was.
It was scary. It was definitely scary. Like, so, okay, there's a few things. One is, I remember a long time reading an article that was written by an author, I can't remember her name, that was asked, like, responding to the question of people like, oh my God, I'm so excited for you. You're like following your dream. You're pursuing your passion. It's amazing. How do you do that? I wish I could do that. Like, how can you do that? And she's like, I have a husband. I have a husband who makes money and puts bread on the table. And this is a very important part of the whole scheme of things. Like, let us not forget the people that like support us. There's no way that I could have possibly done that by myself. And so when people come to me who are like, oh my God, I want to do the same thing, I'm like, can you afford it? Do you have somebody that'll afford it for you? Because I couldn't by myself. And then also it took me, I remember, I had decided to quit a year before I did. And like, we had spent a 3-day weekend going over all the finances and, you know, saying, okay, maybe we can cut here, or, you know, maybe we can rearrange this kind of stuff, whatever. And finally figured out, like, we can do it. Like, I can actually just quit my job and we'll be okay. And I was like, okay, tomorrow I'm going in, I'm going to quit. It's going to be great. And then I like was up at like 2 a.m. crying about it. And Matt's like, you don't have to quit. And I'm like, okay, I won't quit tomorrow. But the next day I'm going to do it. And I did that for like a year. So yes, it was extraordinarily emotional.
Wow. That's intense.
It's scary. Yeah. I think for it depends on the career. From coming from law, I was concerned that there wasn't going to be an on-ramp back if I needed there to be. So I spent a lot of time researching, like, okay, if this fails, like, what happens after? To try to give myself a little bit more comfort.
So is there an on-ramp back, or?
There is and there isn't. Not for like the kind of law that I was doing, like not at a big law firm, realistically. But you know, there are other places within the law where, you know, a few years gap on your resume is not the end of the world, or like going to a boutique or something like that, or can be enough. So I was like, okay, maybe that's enough.
I would feel that a lawyer is being burnt out. It's a pretty common thing now.
Yep.
So
yep.
You would think if they changed their mind, there would be a path back, but it seems like it's a very unforgiving profession.
Yeah, I actually remember. So one of the paths back is kind of as a contract attorney who comes in, does doc review for larger cases at a larger firm. And I remember I was working on Vidar. I was actually planning to leave for some convention while I was still practicing, and I had contract attorneys working for me that had been brought in as a temp agency. And one of them specifically, I was like, oh, I'm leaving, so like you guys will be able to like do your own thing. They're like, oh, like going on vacation. I'm like, I go to this con. I guess I do video game things as well. And one of them was like, oh, I do VO for video games. And I'm like, and now you're here. So it's it's a well-worn path back.
That's interesting. I don't know. It seems like golden handcuffs kind of like remember you're here forever, like that plaque from The Simpsons.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Oh god, that sounds depressing. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's I mean, I'm out now, so.
Hey, there we go. And we're going to talk more about that. So let's talk about that right now. You've done Vidar, like that wonderful poster hanging behind you. And you've also worked on another game called Wastenauts. So let's start with Vidar.
Okay.
Tell us about, I love Vidar. I mean, it was awesome. So tell us about that.
It was, yeah, I'm still like, I'm now at a place where I can look back and be like, you know what, it was a good game for my first like commercial release kind of thing. Especially for someone who had no idea what they were doing.
I feel like you're being modest.
It is, it was fine. It took me a long time to like reconcile the fact that like, it wasn't everything I had dreamed of, but I was like, I'm also one person. So the game that I was talking about where I decided to hire an artist, I was like, okay, maybe we do a Kickstarter. That sounds like the thing that people do. So I ran a Kickstarter for the game. I took it to a handful of conventions. It got, I mean, nothing like major attention or anything like that as I was developing it, but it, you know, there were some people who were like legitimately interested in it. And for me, always, it had started as like two events kind of coinciding at the same time. One was my cousin had passed away, I guess like my third cousin or you know, not somebody my age, but who I felt was very much a kindred spirit, and it was kind of difficult for me to reconcile. And the second was pretty much at the exact same time we were leaving for our honeymoon. And that was a weird dichotomy. And also like my honeymoon was in like the mountains, like in the snowy mountains. And so that was the setting that I kind of had in mind. And I wanted to take the opportunity to like look at death in particular through a game and process a lot of those feelings of how not necessarily like somebody dies and that's like personal suffering, but how much of a ripple effect that has. Like there were so many people at my cousin's funeral who I like never met before who were also weeping, and it's like this man touched so many people. I think that gets kind of missed sometimes in like the stories about death, where it's like it's just like one person like losing their loved one or something. So that was where the focus started, and then I like puzzles, so I've just jammed puzzles into the game. I don't know. I didn't have a good reason for puzzles. I really didn't.
It worked really well, like the random dungeons at the labyrinth where the air quotes monster lived.
Yes. Yeah. I was hesitant to do anything like super combat heavy. It didn't feel right for the tone of the game. But I didn't know what the challenge was otherwise. And I you know, if I were to say revisit it, I'm not sure that the challenge needs to happen. There are a lot more games out there now that are like, no, we can just be narrative games and we stand on our own. Like you can have like since Vidar, I have played walking simulators. I have played a lot of just like purely narrative driven games where I'm like, oh yeah, you don't really need these. You don't need a challenge necessarily to overcome for it to still be compelling. So yeah.
Yeah, we're for Karendow, we're giving the players the option to turn off combat entirely, so they can sort of just make the experience what they want of it.
Yeah, why not? Like, it doesn't hurt anything. Like if you know, it's there if you want it. And otherwise, it's, you know, you can still explore the story.
Yeah. So the original pitch you gave for Vidar was a game where everyone dies.
Yeah.
And it was that's like a pretty good like catch. What are those things called? Like the
like a tagline or something.
Tagline. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it works. So, how much did you ask for on the Kickstarter for that one?
I want to say it was 18,000. I think it was 18,000.
So how did you get most of your backers? Was it the conventions? Was it online, Twitter, Discord, if Discord was a thing really back then?
Discord was not a thing. It was, and I didn't really have a strong Twitter presence at that point. It was friends and family. And to be honest,
Friends and family gave you $18,000. These must be good friends.
I mean,
Oh, holy cow.
like, it is that kind of like, I mean, I use the friends as like kind of your network, but
Right.
I think, and honestly, I think Anya would say the same, that the majority of your backers are going to be your community, but a lot of those people are your friends and family. I think the way that Kickstarter put it is like, look at the last 50 people you emailed, and like they're going to be like a good chunk of your donations.
Oh god, I don't email anyone anymore.
Or I think now that was back then. So maybe like, you know, whoever you like pinged on Discord or whoever you texted or whoever, whatever. But those people who are kind of more present in your life, at least right now, are gonna be your backers. Yeah. So there's a fair amount of that. And then conventions were, so I did a lot of conventions during that period, and they were a mixed bag. I always tell the story that like there were definitely some that I did where there was absolutely no backers, right? But there was, it's always hard to connect the dots because I did MagFest during that Kickstarter.
Yeah, MagFest, it's coming back.
It is coming back. I'm just really excited to like be going to places as an attendee and as an exhibitor.
Gary and I are going to be there. At least I will. Hopefully Gary can cross the border.
Yeah, when actually is MagFest happening at the same time?
They haven't announced the dates yet, but they are.
Yeah.
They just posted their website like yesterday or something that they're coming back.
I mean, PAX West is gonna be in person, so that's gonna be yeah, before it. But about a week later, I got a pledge of $800 on the Kickstarter after MagFest, like from a single person, and I was like, $800 doesn't come from somebody you don't know,
Yeah,
right?
who
Like
was that?
$800 like never. Like, yeah, that's like way too much for one person. So I messaged the person. I'm like, "Hi, thanks, but who are you?" And they're like, "Oh, I saw your game at MagFest. Really enjoyed it. Played it. I just had to move some money around before I was like able to pledge." If I hadn't made that connection, like direct message to them, there's no way I would have been like, "Oh, this is from MagFest," because it happened a week later. And it was just
$100 just from a random stranger at MagFest. That is like the best expo ever.
Blair, my motto throughout this entire process has been, if I have to be in the right place at the right time, I will just be everywhere all the time.
Yes, you make me feel exhausted.
So, and that was one of those like right place at the right time moments. So, yeah, it was a really interesting experience to go through that Kickstarter. And I mean, ultimately, like Vidar didn't really make money, but it, I guess looking back on it, I don't feel like it needed to.
So would you be willing to share the revenue numbers or not?
I mean, I have not looked at it in ages. I haven't gotten paid out by Steam in ages.
Oh, okay.
Because like they don't pay you unless you've sold like
you break a certain amount,
certain threshold or whatever, and I don't think they've cut me a check in like over 2 years at this point. But I imagine, I mean, like, let me see.
You're looking right now?
Yeah, I'm gonna look at the yeah, it's about right. I mean, typically what you can do is like 50 times the number of reviews on Steam. That's about how many units have sold. So 50 to 75, yeah. So it was like, it was nothing. Like, it's only got 15 reviews on Steam. But I've kind of reauthored that experience for myself as like a learning experience, one that put me in touch with a lot of great people, one that got me a Kotaku article.
Hey, that's pretty cool. Hey, Burgle's Bounty, that's what I say Burgle's Bounty was, it only made $80, but
listen, if it turns a profit, it's better than most indie games.
That is actually a lot more than what I thought it made. I thought it only made like $5.
Well, yeah, Apple
had
has
one
since
friend that
pulled
bought
it. Google and Apple have both pulled it from the store because we haven't updated it, and we're no longer aligned with their terms of service or whatever.
Oh,
but
God,
so that's the end of
It's
an
like
era.
exhausting to keep.
I'm
up with
not
these
going
things.
back to update that stuff
Yeah,
unless
I
there's
feel
a
that.
strong, compelling reason.
I very much feel that. Yeah.
All right, so we've done Vidar. Let's
Okay.
do. Well, you know what? Let's circle back to Wastenauts later. I actually let's leave the best for last. Let's talk about the games you've produced.
Okay, so I while I was still doing Raspberry Games, I think and this is, the more I understand about the industry, the more and more this like is just common out of necessity, is that like you're working on a lot of projects at once and you're freelancing as much as you can, and your own project quickly takes a back burner to other stuff. So I was a producer, like as a freelancer, for two games. One was Outpost Delta, which was a game by the studio Hidden Achievement. They're based in Austin, Texas, and that was a Metroidvania. And the other was for Zelda Singularity, which is by Computer Lunch.
Yes, we are having Andrew on next.
Nice.
So we'll be talking about that one a lot. But Outpost Delta, not okay. I don't want to offend anyone here, but that game needed some work.
It did. I think, we managed to pull something out of the fire at the last minute that I was like, you know what, this isn't terrible. The game had been in development for about 4 years, I want to say, before I joined the team. And they were like, we just need somebody, like this was supposed to be an 18-month project, like what the hell happened? And so I kind of came in mostly to get the game out the door. I think by the time that, like when I came in and I have like fresh energy, I'm like, yeah, new game, let's do it, it's gonna be fun. Everyone else is like, fuck this game. And
that's
so
positive energy right there.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it sounds like they've been chewed up and spit out already.
Yeah, like I don't know anybody who's worked on a game for 4 years and still likes it. Like,
Hey,
still likes their
Karendow's
game.
going on 3, and I still like it.
Okay.
Because whenever I play it, I love it.
Did you feel that way about Burgle's Bounty, Blair?
Yeah.
I was ready. Burgle's Bounty. Well, I mean, let's just look at the latest version of Burgle's Bounty of all the incarnations. After the 2-ish year dev cycle, I was done with it. But
Yeah.
here I am, 3 years in on Karendow, and I still have energy to keep this going.
I think there's just, that fatigue sets in. I don't begrudge anyone for that at all. I think it was like a perfectly normal, healthy thing where that just happens. And especially when there's not a producer kind of there to be like, to keep the drum marching, and make sure that things aren't spiraling out of control. It can just be difficult to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So ultimately, I thought that the game was technically, like from a development and tech side, pretty excellent. Like there were strikingly few issues that we were running into, especially for a sim launch for a team of 4 people. Right.
Okay.
We launched simultaneously on PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch, and that was, indie studios 4 times the size don't do a sim launch like that.
Yeah, I couldn't get
we
more
did
than
it-
5 minutes into the game without dying. Either I'm really bad or
No, but it is admittedly unbalanced, and I think that the design was a little lacking. I took over as a designer as well on that to try to like do something with it, because I was like, we have all this cool tech, can we do something with it? We just didn't have enough time before like it really needed to be out the door. We had talked honestly about doing like an Outpost Delta 2 using the same engine, because it's like, oh, okay, now if we can actually make a game, like, this was a fun first pass at it, but if we could do something like with cool Metroidvania elements, I think it would have gone. I think it could have been
probably been better.
Game. Yeah. I do think that it was a big ask, and it was a nice place for the so the studio is run by two former AAA vets who both have done a lot of dev work, and it's nice to be at like a technically run place, and see that side of things. This was like a nice feather in their cap to be like, okay, we're now out on console. Like we have released our own games on console, in addition to doing a lot of contract work, which they do for other like AAA titles and stuff like that. Yeah.
Nice. So if we ever want to make it as indie devs, we're just going to be doing a lot of other people's work, is what you're saying.
Yeah. No, I think that's probably right. Yeah. I mean, the opportunity to just kind of run your own studio is pretty minimal. I mean, I know Francisco does it, but it's difficult to just kind of keep your head down and do your own thing without some funding. And that typically has to come in the form of like regular checks coming in from other sources, where you're doing contract work, whether it's from the dev side, art side, production side, whatever it is. Yeah.
Right. So on top of all of that, you also teach, or are you still teaching?
I'm not. I am officially no longer. I am officially
at all. Like you're done forever.
I have honed in on one damn job.
Congratulations. Okay, but
so just to be clear, what kind of teaching was this? Is like teaching like school?
Yeah.
Or?
So I was teaching. There's a community college, Hostos, up in the Bronx, which is part of CUNY, and they have a great game design program there. And so I was teaching. I taught game design 101, which is just like intro to games kind of concepts, and game design 201, which was specifically on video games. I did that for maybe 3 years, I want to say. And yeah, it was great. It was really excellent to I never had a game design education. And so part of this was I had to teach myself like the way that the pedagogy would be approached, and so that I could then explain it, right? Like it's
Gary and I never had a game design education either. We just made it up as we went along.
I think the idea of one is very rare, especially the kind of like where you and I came from. Like I think these days it's a lot more common to see, especially you know, with a lot of online products, I guess, that are available, and you know, with lots of game design schools that are also out there as well. That it's actually a lot more available to people now, whereas it was pretty much non-existent back then. But you know, I think between Blair and I, we got very good at reverse engineering stuff by, I guess, looking at other people's games and scrounging around the internet for whatever was out there.
Yeah, it was definitely like a way more like you have to be resourceful kind of era that we grew up in for games. But even just like were we like all like 5 years younger, we would have probably been able to at least start to find like good game design programs. But New York has some great ones. Obviously, New York, like NYU, you know, as well in New York City. But RIT, Bloomfield right across the river. And so there's a lot of great resources here now for students who want to do it. Yeah.
So when you're teaching that though, and you know how hard it is to make it in this industry unless you get a job at a AAA company, what do you tell them? Like, what do the students come in to do? Like, are they thinking they're going to run an awesome indie studio or make, you know, the next Flappy Bird or Angry Birds or whatever? Or
it was a mixed bag. Surprisingly, most students are like still uninterested and pretty unfamiliar with like indie games and the indie game scene, was my impression generally. At least the students that I had. I think that changes depending on program to program, school to school, even class to class, within a given program. My students, some of them were literally just there to like learn about video games because they like video games and had no real planned to like go into an industry. It's like, here's an elective for them or something like that. And that's cool. That's awesome. Those were some of my favorite classes in college myself, right? Were the classes where I was like, my job does not depend on this. So that was great. Definitely had students who, you know, wanted to specifically get into game design, game art, game writing. A lot of writers that were like, you know, I love crafting stories for games. And yeah, we would typically talk about like, you know, different paths to try to do something like that, to get into the industry.
And did the kids seem like they were interested, or were they like, fuck that, I'm out? No, I just swore.
They again, it was kind of mixed. I think as any college class typically is,
Yeah.
right? But I
They don't know what they
definitely
want
had
to
a
do
lot of-
yet.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I think, you know, a lot of them, for a lot of them, it was the first time where they were like confronted with the realities of game design are something beyond, I have a cool idea for a game. Like, it's like, okay, that's where you start. Like, that's day one. The rest of it is refining that idea and, you know, explaining why it won't work, and, you know, trying to fix it in a million different ways and look at it through a dozen different lenses and all this kind of stuff. And for some of them, that was kind of like, if it was just going to be a hobby, they're like, I just want to make a cool game for myself. And for others, they wanted to rise and meet that challenge and be like, oh, I actually want to make a fun game as opposed to just a game. That was always my focus. I was like, anyone can just make a game. I'm not here to like for you to crank out student games for your portfolio. There are other classes, and they're important classes because you gotta be able to show that you can do something. But my classes were specifically on like what turns a game into a fun one.
Makes sense. So Gary, would you say that when we were kids, when we were 8 years old, making this doing game dev, were we in it to be hobbyists, or were we in to make it?
I don't know. Like I don't say that I ever was in it thinking that I was going to make it big or anything. I guess for me, I just wanted to make a game that I myself would enjoy playing, or you have an opportunity to, you know, write a really cool story that I would have enjoyed if, let's say, if I was experiencing it externally. Yeah, but then again, like when I say that, how does that apply to like Rabbit Hunter, that game that stupid game that I made on the Commodore 64, right?
The 10x10 grid where you just had to type in random numbers. I
was just like messing around, and I thought that was fun because I was learning. I was learning, right?
So, you want to be a diver, huh? I don't blame you. It's quite a view from up here. But mercs like us, we live for the drop. You checked your parachute, right? The machines thought they were rid of us, but we need them for spare parts. It's up to us to get down there, grab what we can, and get back home before the meaner bastards show up. Andrea, for the last time, my hairspray is not a flamethrower!
I know I wanted to. That was where I wanted to go. I can't say that it was necessarily supported broadly, but I ultimately ended up not really doing it until arguably not even now. But it's just like it's something we've talked about a few times on the podcast, is if the education was there, maybe if the support was there, would have I gone down a different path from day one? Who knows?
It's, you know, it's possible, but I still talk to more people who for their story starts off like mine, where they're like, I got to games kind of weird. Like my path was a little like circuitous or something like that. I talk to more of those people than people who are like, I graduated from a game design program and now I am in games. I think that's probably a large function of just how new game design programs are. And that's going to change over time as we see more and more of these graduates entering the workforce. But I still, I think that it's perfectly fine, and in fact healthy, to come to games from someplace else, because then you bring a new perspective.
So if you could go back and change something about Vidar, like what would you done? What do you think you could have done to make this? Well, let's be honest. Let's say make it more successful.
Oh, I probably still don't have the answers to that. I feel like I know more than I did, but I don't know that I could have made it any more successful. I would have, obviously, like now I'm much more comfortable with my tools, so I would have loved to have made it in Unity. I would have loved to,
I'll give you the Karendow engine for the remake.
Yes, excellent. Thank you.
Some things in that code base are getting kind of messy though, but hey,
it happens for any sufficiently large game. I would have liked to just put more effort and energy into the actual marketing of it. Or honestly, particularly as compared to Wastenauts, Vidar would have been much better publisher bait to actually get somebody to fund it, publish it, market it for me.
Did you try?
I didn't at all. I didn't know that publishers were a thing. Like I had no concept as to that until so after the game was out, I was accepted to Indie Mega Booth for Vidar, and I was setting it up at PAX West, and Z from Serenity Forge came over to me and was like, "Wait, are you involved in Vidar?" And I was like, "When you say involved, like I yes." In that I did all of it except for the art and music. And he was like, "Oh man, like I judged this game for some other like thing I had submitted for." And he's like, "I love it. It's like such a great concept and all that kind of stuff." And I'm like, "How much did my husband pay you to say that? Who are you?" And he's like, "Yeah, like how sales been going and that kind of stuff." And I was like, "Oh, it didn't do anything, but I'm just excited to be here because Indie Mega Booth was always like a dream of mine, and showing at PAX was always a dream of mine." And he was like, "Oh, really? Like I kind of had figured that you already had like all of your like publishing and stuff sorted." And I was like, No, I didn't have any of that. Publisher? What is this? What is going on?" And so that was kind of like my first entry into it, but it was obviously too late for Vidar there. I think it would have been a really good thing to be able to, now that I'm sitting on the side of the publisher, and now that I, spend probably 4 or 5 hours a week of my time reviewing other games as to whether they would be a good fit for publishing.
So you get to be the jerk that rejects games now.
Yes, I do. I reject so much. No, I actually really love it because I love giving feedback, but we could talk about that in a second. But I do feel like Vidar would have been a better fit than Wastenauts, certainly. And yeah, that's probably the direction it would have gone.
Yeah, so actually on that note, let's talk about early access, because you and I have actually talked about this before on Discord and other venues, etc. But what's your take on this? Because I had suggested to you that Gary and I are actually going to put Karendow on Steam Early Access. And you seem kind of, I think hesitant, or maybe, are you sure this is the right thing? I'd like to hear what you have to say.
I think early access is a good tool, but you need to know what you are trying to achieve with it. And if it's just sales, if it's literally just we want to get sales, then it is I think a bad deal, because it would
be about building a community, getting a fan base, and getting the word out, and getting more people on Discord, and starting a conversation, and hopefully building on that from there.
Right. So that's an interesting goal in general, right? In terms of building a community and stuff like that. Here's the issue. It's a single player RPG. So my feeling is, person buys it on early access. They join the Discord. Okay. You've got numbers on your Discord, but it's not numbers that are going to then convert at launch. They've already bought the game. And so if this were a multiplayer game where people are going to bring in their friends, if this were a live ops game where it's going to constantly evolve or something like that, if this were a game where community mattered more, then I'd be like, community is a good goal. But my feeling on kind of like a single player RPG or narrative experience or stuff like that is it's an experience, and it's probably a one-time one. And so the likelihood that I have never played an RPG in early access that I'm like, I'm gonna play this again when it comes out. I'm like, no, I got a picture.
Well, I don't think there's a lot of high quality indie RPGs, not even early access, just period. A lot of them are kind of shovelware. But
I feel like there's some good ones out there, but
there are good. There are some, but there's not a lot.
But I guess, Dean, are you speaking like regardless of the quality of the game? Like even if it was good, it would be kind of like a one-time experience. Oh, you know what? I played this RPG. It was cool, but I don't really care to play the rest of it when it comes out because
maybe if there was like a branching narrative, maybe if there's like if there's replay
we are not doing a branching narrative.
but like so start to think about like what does that are all you're doing is shifting your sales earlier and in a way where Steam isn't going to support you as much, where people are going to see like the early access tag and be like, I'm going to wait. It strikes me that you could like use that time to actually just make the game good out the gate. And
find a publisher.
Or find a publisher.
Because building an audience is really hard anyway. That's actually what motivated Gary and I to start the podcast. Is like, well, maybe we can get a fan base for the podcast and then translate that into the game. Who knows if that'll actually work? The podcast isn't going so well so far, but
I think we just need to bring a crazier Gary.
Yeah, Gary, I think you need to be the personality here. You're the one that usually has all the witty comments and inappropriate things to say. I censor myself too much.
Well, I'm trying to get canceled here, Blair. So I gotta be hit.
You should get canceled. We got to be controversial, I think.
I think
you can say something offensive.
Let's get fired.
I am blessed to now work with at a company that has a separate marketing team, so I don't have to think about this crap because this is not my strong suit at all.
So, do you want to publish Kids of Karendow? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Do I? Sure. But there's a lot more. I think in general, there's more work that has to go into this than every single indie gives it credit. And I think the more that I see what our marketing team does, like at Akupara, the more I realize how bespoke it is, how really tailored like your marketing concepts have to be.
That's hard.
It really, really is. And it requires such a fundamental knowledge of the gaming industry, of your game in particular, about what is cool about, like, what is great about your game. Like, I think about, a lot about ugly games. Like, Wastenauts had great key art and illustrations, but we didn't have visual effects really at all to speak of. We didn't have good animations. We had good illustrations. And those were fine for screenshots and stuff like that, but ugly games actually like don't belong, for example, on social media, because they're not artist driven. I'm comparing that to a game that's beautiful, like a Grease, or like a what's the one that Raw Fury is doing right now, Sable, where it's like that thing was GIF first, right? That game had a GIF and then they built a gameplay around it. Not we have a cool gameplay and we're going to figure out the art style. That's a very real large chunk of the gaming industry. And those are the games that are going to do phenomenally well on social media. But where are the gamers that want something crunchy living? They're probably not getting that information from social media like that. Maybe they're on forums, maybe they're like using other media or stuff like that. So for, like, what I didn't do with Wastenauts and what I needed to have done has been like, where are my players there? As opposed to saying, I'm just going to post on Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. where are my players? And then how do I actually convey to them the cool things about this game? Like, forget trying to like pass off a screenshot. Forget trying to do that. Like, how do I actually tell them, here's the really cool thing about this game? And good marketers do that day in, day out. And I don't think a lot of indie devs really think about that.
I don't think indie devs are very good at marketing, period.
Yeah.
It's our kind of biggest shortcoming. And that's where I actually think publishers can, or I'd like to see where publishers can help out the most, because that is where we suck the most.
Yeah, I think, a good publisher can, take a look at a game, say, understand, here is the really cool part about this game. Here is what's going to sell. I know that, for example, our team sometimes does like cross media like understanding. So like, what are other things in other forms of media that are similar styles or resonate with the same demographic? Sometimes they'll reach out and do, work with other indie developers. And I think, I'm going to confirm that we actually did this, that we announced this game that we're publishing before I say when we did this game. But Okay, cool. When we announced that we were going to be publishing a game called Absolute Tactics, like they started to do like started a hashtag for Tactics Tuesday. And so they were like, okay, we're going to actually feature a lot of other tactics games. And now we're trying to grab all of the people on Twitter who are actually interested in tactics, which is kind of a niche.
Yeah,
to look at this, right? Tactics don't resonate with a lot of gamers. Like it's like chess, right? It's very slow.
Well,
it's very like
it's like Final Fantasy Tactics or other tactics games like that.
Or Banner Saga or
Get the fan base of those games.
Yeah, exactly. And then inviting like, and tagging other, like they did the research for like, here are all the other indie tactics games that are in development, not being published by Akupara, but now we can combine them all into one Twitter. And so now when somebody sees that, they're like, oh, I love tactics games. I'm going to go through wishlist all these. So.
And hope they convert when they release.
Right. It's about finding your audience. And that's a nearly impossible task.
I feel like for Karendow, much easier than Burgle's Bounty because JRPGs have a set audience out there. I feel like what do I want to say here? It's like you just have to find them. Like you just have to get the game out there, and it has to be a decent quality. Like it can't be nothing against RPG Maker, but it can't be an RPG Maker asset recycle, whatever.
It can't be an asset recycle. Yeah, I mean, listen, I am far from a successful person who's using RPG Maker, as opposed to say the one who's making She Dreams Elsewhere. Like that thing is blowing up. And that's
really? I saw the MegFest back in 2020.
Oh
before COVID.
That's getting a lot of attention. It's also been in Mega Booth. It's also like
it's like the low color, low resolution kind of.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed that game.
Yeah, that was good.
It's so good. It's so good. And he's so amazing. And when I judged it for the MagFest showcase all those years ago, I instantly recognized. I was like, wait a second. This is actually RPG Maker, and I think I'm the only one who knows this.
No, I can tell when it's playing.
And
I can usually tell when a game is RPG Maker.
Yeah, I mean, there's some specific limitations to it. So, but yeah, it's not about the tools. It's specifically about like the quality that you're putting out. So.
I think Karendow is going to be good quality, right, Gary? Right?
Oh yeah, it's going to be absolutely amazing, especially the tunes.
Oh yeah, the music's kicking ass right now. I'll give credit where credit is due. All right, we're gonna talk a little bit more about Wastenauts.
All right.
So
my failure.
Well, is this Wastenauts or Waste Nuts? It's gonna be a complete different game. I don't know how you answer this. Hi, Gary.
It's truly whatever you want it to be.
So let's start with your pitch for it, because
okay. The pitch for Wastenauts, which at the time was from Rust, and even before that was Scrapyard, it went through a lot of name changes, was a co-op collectible card game. So we wanted to do Hearthstone that you play with your friends instead of against them. That was the pitch. It evolved a lot over time. Once Slay the Spire blew up, it like our pitch then became multiplayer Slay the Spire, because it was like, oh, this is kind of close to it. We never really figured it out for the exact like wording. There was no like clear RPG where everyone dies for like it was for Vidar.
There was a, but you said something along the lines of like multiplayer online dungeon crawler card.
It was
like
so many things. It was multiplayer, it was online. It was we called it a card crawler for a while, because we were trying to figure out what is the genre of games like Slay the Spire or Monster Train or stuff like that is not about it being a roguelike. And oftentimes those are roguelike and deck builders, right? Those are the genres that are used to describe those games. And we were neither. But we still wanted to convey the sense that you are going through a dungeon and using cards to do your stuff. And we had no genre title for that. This is actually an interesting thing that I think it was Riot was like, the first thing that we have to do is figure out what is the genre for that chess, like that auto chess thing. So they like had to come up with the term auto battler, because they're like, we have to tell other people that we are of the same kind. If you're trying to figure out the genre, you may have already lost.
yeah, okay. That, I mean, so I would have actually loved to have seen Wastenauts or Wastenauts.
Wastenauts, yeah.
As I think I told you this because I love the world you guys created, like the steampunk kind of like the robots have taken over the ground and all the humans live in air cities now. That would have been a fucking awesome action RPG.
Yeah, I mean by the point, it's interesting because literally the first time that we had conceived of it was my partner Dan's. He was doing like as a setting for a tabletop RPG, like a homebrew tabletop RPG kind of thing. I think we had conceived of it first as a physical card game. It got very crunchy, and we were Dan works at Obsidian. Are inevitably like the UI person that we brought on, Anna, worked at Sony. Like our experience was all video games, and so the idea that I was going to be making a physical card game and having to research like manufacturing and shipping and like the size of boxes, I was like, I don't know anything about this crap. Like I don't.
But do you think that maybe it would, like, because that's a different market right there? Do you think you might have seen different success or different interest?
It's possible, because at the time that we were looking at it, tabletop on Kickstarter was like, you could put anything on tabletop at Kickstarter and it would fund. That has since ended, but that wasn't the case like 3 or 4 years ago. So it's possible, but we didn't know anything about it. We really had no idea where to start with that kind of work to do a physical card game. And so it became an online game. I have no programming background, but I was the programmer for the whole thing, and I was trying to do like network multiplayer, which took forever. And then it just kind of it got stuck, I think, a little bit. And also, we didn't give enough credit to this fact that it was boring. The game was boring, and
well, you had a lot of people engage in the alphas. Did they think it was boring? Because it always seemed like you would. But
that's, I mean, and I think like you and I've talked about this in the past before, but that was like very much confirmation bias, right? Is that we had like, oh, cool, we've got 10, 20, 50 people or whatever playing this game, like in the alphas. But what about everyone else? Like where, and like our mailing list is, 10 times this, 100 times this, or whatever it is. Why aren't they here? Why aren't they playing this game? I
think you probably maybe 1% of your mailing list anyway.
It's like, yeah, and I think ultimately it was boring. And ultimately, you talked a little bit about like, do we get a publisher for Kids of Karendow? I think regardless of whether you want one, you should apply for one. You should pitch as many publishers as you can. Because the only people who were telling us the truth the entire time and giving us consistent feedback were the publishers that we were pitching.
They were telling you it was boring?
Yes, every single one of them were telling us this game loop like is is fine for about like a half hour, and that's about it. And we weren't listening. And ultimately, like, you know, that's the way to pierce like the bullshit. Like, you can give a build to, you know, people who found, there's always gonna be somebody at PAX who likes your game. There's always gonna be somebody, and you're gonna be like, oh my god, they like the game. They see it. They understand me. And it's like, okay, but there's like 30,000 people here. What about the other ones? Like, and
that was my experience with Burgle's Bounty.
Yeah, you know, and there's always going to be like friends who of course are like, oh my god, I'm so glad that you're making a game and like following your passion.
It's like, oh, it's so cute.
So cute. But where the rubber hits the road is when you go to somebody and ask, like, I want $120,000 to make this game, and they tell you no, and here's why. Like,
Shark Tank.
Good feedback. I think it's constructive.
Yeah. Like, you know, when I'm giving feedback like for Akupara, I take a lot of time to in part because it's almost never a no, it's always a not yet.
I was like, fix this, and this, and send it back to us.
And then send it back to us, and we'll take a look at it. But so as a result, I try to really like give a lot of, I lean into it a lot. And I'm gonna send you kids of Karendow. And I'll give you like the full like Akupara treatment, right? I think that that feedback we were not taking it seriously enough. We would read it and we would say, oh, we kind of just need to tweak these like one or two things, when the fundamental like dynamics of the game were not there.
So you took it to Kickstarter. What was your, because I wanted to bring up the survivorship bias, because the Gumbos bring that up a lot.
Okay.
So what was your point of no return? What was like, okay, at this point, if this doesn't work out, I'm done. I'm walking away from this project I've been working on for 3 years, because that is not easy.
It's not.
Like, it's a bad artistic decision, but a good business decision.
Yeah. I mean, the better business decision would have been to walk away earlier, obviously. But I think we didn't have a path forward after the Kickstarter failed, right? So for that one, we were asking for 30,000, which was a lot more, but it was also the absolute possible minimum to get us to an early access state. And that was all it was going to do. It was going to include no new content. It was going to include like just basically like what we have, clean it up and get it to early access. And I thought, did everything that we could do to, like, I came away from that. I didn't want to have the feeling after the Kickstarter when it failed of, you know, what I really should have done was like do this, or, oh, you know, I had this idea but I never executed, or something like that. I really felt like we did everything we could possibly do, and sometimes games just don't fun, in part because maybe like they're not resonating or something like that, or they're not getting enough eyeballs, and you're just like not, you know, being seen by enough people. It happens all the time. So yep. That was a, you know, I think we kind of, there were some last gasps after the Kickstarter.
I was sad that I was actually sad for you, because it's like, oh my god, he must be a wreck right now, because I would be a wreck if I were him.
You know, Kickstarter is like a slow motion train wreck, because you have like 30 days, and by day 6 I knew that this wasn't going to fund.
Things picked up a little bit in the middle there because I was watching it.
They did in part because either we funded it or I had friends who funded it who like injected.
Okay.
That's yeah. I mean, like there was an effort to like boost the, you know, the numbers and like start to get the thing going. But it really wasn't. What was the most concerning to me wasn't the like the trajectory there, like, oh, or like are the numbers on the right, like, you know, path for averages or whatever, was the fact that we had 0 comments on the page. We had no, like, even though we passed like our goal on day 1, I would like by end of day 1 I was like, oh, holy shit, like we've got, you know, I wanted to get 20% in the first 3 days. We had 20% in day 1, and I was like, hot damn, this is great. We had 0 comments from all that. Nobody. And throughout the entire campaign, I think we got like 2. Despite doing updates, despite like trying to like bait those kinds of things. And I realized that our community was not engaged. Whoever was backing us was just kind of like backing and forgetting. And I realized pretty quickly we were like in the weeds. Yeah. That's the scary part, right? It's a, when you put out a new build, you can test your community by like seeing like how many people then show up in the Discord and start posting like memes or like start responding to it or something.
Our Discord is dead.
Like, well, I mean, like wherever you end up with your community, that's a
long way to go.
Yeah, that I think we messed up there.
So Gary, are you terrified yet? Think Karendow's gonna fail?
I don't know. I mean, could as you said, we do have a really quiet Discord, right? But like another thing that kind of Dean said earlier was kind of related to like, I don't think people would really care unless we have like a full game that they can play. I honestly, I don't see people being engaged throughout the whole time playing the builds. I think they would much rather wait till a finished Karendow was available and then play it.
How many RPGs are you both following these days? Like active
I am
members?
following Chained Echoes.
Okay.
There's another one that's been in development. I don't know if it's still in development. It's called Sully, Very Serious RPG. I think that one project may be abandoned at this point. There is, what's that called again? Sea of Stars.
Are you like an active community member? You're like posting in the Discord like once a week?
I don't post any. No, not at all. I'm gonna buy these games when they're available, but I'm not. I don't participate.
What about you, Gary? Like, how many Discords for RPGs are you posting in?
I am not participating in any of them. Like for me, I'm waiting for Dragon Age 4 to come out. Like personally, but like I'm not like looking at stuff like every day and just like waiting for updates. Right? I would just much rather when it comes out, I'm gonna go get it.
And y'all have a way more vested interest than normal players because you're working on one. So like you are already way more predisposed to be those people than a regular player or somebody who's going to be part of your community. Right. And so, it's a tough problem to solve in terms of like how do you find those people when they're not going to be interested until it's like closer to launch. Yeah, but then by that point it's like too late. It feels like it's too late.
Well, it has to be. When we're really close, somewhat close to launch, maybe that's when we start really pushing it somehow.
Yeah.
So, would you ever reimagine? Like you've got, lack of a better way of putting it, you have a boring gameplay loop. Would you ever revisit it, make it better, and try again?
I thought about it. Right after the Kickstarter failed, we advanced to like the second or third round with publishing back and forths with Ubisoft.
Really?
Yeah, and we got some feedback, but they were like, here's our initial concerns, but we're moving this up the chain, like as it goes. And then we were rejected. But with that feedback, I was like, okay, enough is enough. The Kickstarter failed. We're hearing the same kind of thing over and over again. How do we fix this? And I like busted out some index cards and was like, let's break this game down the spine and just try again. And write out some new cards on some index cards and play it and see what feels fun. It was an interesting exercise, but I think I was too close to like the failure of the Kickstarter. I think I needed to sit for a while before I tried to revisit it again.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It's always nice in a couple years to revisit an old project and see this is fun. It's like whenever I play Burgle's Bounty, and this game was pretty fun. When nobody liked it.
Every so often I have an idea in the shower where I'm like, oh, that's what we should have done. And it's like now crystal clear, but without distance, it's very difficult to get that perspective.
Interesting. That's. For you, I guess it's maybe it's just time. You just, or maybe it's a different project.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me spin that question. Instead of revisiting Wastenauts, would you ever come back and do your own project again?
Maybe. I'm really and this is like maybe a good transition to like what I'm doing now, because I am doing some of this stuff. So Akupara is a indie game house, for lack of a better term. They do publishing, they do internal development, they also do work for hire.
So can you tell us everything that you're under NDA for right now?
Yes, absolutely. So we do primarily like three things. They do publishing of indie games. They do their own game development, like entirely internally. And then they also do work for hire kind of projects as they come up. And I am a producer like on all three of those in various forms. I think I'm on like 6 or 7 games right now. Some of mine are, I tend to be more of a technical hat. So some of mine where we are publishing the game, I am leading our internal developers to do the port, just to like, kind of make sure we're checking all the boxes. I've launched on console before, so like here's going to be the requirements, things like that. We do get to do some kind of fun stuff where we're like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we integrated with this feature on like that platform or whatever, but it's typically pretty straightforward. But I want to say 2 of my projects right now are internal development projects, which are being built from the ground up. And actually they're even though like Akupara is itself a publisher, we are pitching to hire up on the food chain investors for them. Not we would like to publish them internally, but pitching to other investors for bigger budget games. And I'm kind of taking over the role of like helping oversee the development of vertical slices and pitch decks and all that kind of stuff. In that role, I have the opportunity to work with game designers. I have the opportunity to work with the programmers and the artists and the audio team and the writers and all that kind of stuff. And so I feel like I am very much involved in these projects, including from, obviously not a day-to-day design, but certainly somebody who is like the final arbiter of like, no, this design is or is not good enough, and here's my feedback and things like that. And that's kind of nice to be part of a team and not to have to do it all myself.
But wouldn't you want to create your creation or have your own idea come to life?
Not necessarily. I actually,
Okay.
I'm not, I mean, like I think I'm at my best when somebody has like the big picture idea. I am really enjoying working with like creative directors and being like, and them saying like, here's the vision, here is the global concept. And me being like, we're going to tweak this thing and that thing, and we're going to make this more fun and more interesting. And here's my feedback over here. And that's where my creativity, gets to come to play, as opposed to having to be responsible for like, here's my idea and everything that goes into it.
Yeah, it's pretty hard as an indie. You're right. I mean, that's like a good point, actually. I want my idea, but I want a team to do it for me.
Yeah, and I think that listen, probably Stardew Valley is the only game that I can think of where like one person had literally a good idea. Did it all. Yeah. I think everyone else who has just tried to make a game and not gotten feedback on their design, they've made a bad game. Everyone else in the world.
That's why the indies take them to expos usually, because that's when, quite frankly, the public shits on your stuff pretty hard.
It's true.
They'll lie to you and say, "Oh, it's so fun," but you can just see how they're playing it, and so you usually tell when someone's engaged or not. And
that's it's like a check engine light, right? Yep. If somebody's like not playing it, but it doesn't give you creativity, like it doesn't give you that feedback of like being in a designer's room with 3 people talking about like what this game should look like, one from a narrative perspective, one from a mechanics perspective. And I think that just, there's a reason that most like TV shows have writers' rooms and not writer.
Gary and I actually do that a reasonable amount. Probably not as much as we should. But I really enjoy those sort of brainstorming moments.
Yeah. I think it's really
I would love it if
important.
Gary lived in New York and we could get together like every day. And
I know, man. We came up with a lot of good ideas when I was in town.
Oh,
the
yeah.
other year.
everything, all of them made it into the game.
That's the way to do it, and like that's where you get your best ideas, right? So I'm really privileged to. One of the game designers I'm working with right now is in London, and so I'm really privileged to just like wake up every morning and see what all of like the new design is for like this vertical slice, and I'm like, oh, cool! I get to just like see new game design and like comment on it and have that kind of back and forth.
Somebody else does the design. I tear it apart.
Yes, yeah. I mean, no, truly, it's a it's an exercise. I'm obviously looking at it from much more of a questions of scope, of technical capabilities, of a little bit of marketing, right? So if I see something where I'm like, hey, if we just add this, then like Nintendo will feature us or something, right? From the perspective, a vertical slice that we're currently drafting had a lot of like branching paths of like options of ways that you can solve a puzzle. And I'm like, this is a vertical slice, it's 10 minutes, an investor's going to play it once, and I'm not making a ton of content for that they're not going to see. And so the solution is just make them all required. Like all these branches are now, you can do them in any order, but they're required. And those kinds of back and forth, I think having different lenses to approach a single game is critical that you're looking at. And from an indie perspective, when you're by yourself, when I was by myself, I had to look at my games through all of those lenses by myself. I had to sit down and say, I'm just looking at this game from a design perspective. And now tomorrow, I'm just looking at it from a business perspective. And now the next day, I'm just looking at it from a narrative cohesion perspective. And that can get exhausting.
You see, that
sounds exhausting to
yeah.
a context switch like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that is exhausting. I don't know if I do that quite. I definitely don't do it every day or every other day because
it's impossible.
often I'm in the weeds actually making the thing.
Yeah.
But I sometimes find myself losing it. It's like, is this any good?
Right.
And then I will every now and then whenever I do a build, like once every 2 months, and actually play through it and fix all the bugs. Like, oh, this is fun. Okay, this needs to be changed. There's a problem here. Or but I still think this game is going to have a market. Now, I could be lying to myself. I need someone else to tell me that.
You need to pitch it to a bunch of publishers and have them all tell you that simultaneously.
I don't feel like I'm ready. Like I think it's a good advice. I just don't think it's ready yet.
I will say, for Wastenauts, we pitched to publishers very early, and all the games that come into me where I'm like, yes, I'm like, these are with it realistically, like within a year of launch. It's rare that a game that's further out than that. I mean, it has happened where I've seen a game that's like planned launch like 2024, and I'm like, but it's really good. But it's pretty rare, and by and large, it's like, okay, now I have enough to see it where I'm like, I get the idea, and I'm excited for it. It needs to be about a year, 18 months maybe.
Okay, Dean, can I put you on the spot?
Okay.
You played the Kids of Karendow demo. It was a while ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Yeah. Okay. So go from those memories. How well do you remember it?
Okay.
Tell us what you thought. Be brutally honest.
All right. So I'll put on my publisher hat here, and look at it from the lens of, do I think that there is do we sell this game? Like, how does this fit? Within the market and stuff like that. My immediate impression is that selling it based on screenshots is going to be tough, because I don't think that there's a artistic point of view that is sellable on its own. I think that the hook, like if I was somebody who's going to say, okay, how am I going to market this? How am I going to get press attention? Mm-hmm. To me, the hook was probably going to be something along the lines of how to inject toilet humor into Final Fantasy. And I think that that's a selling point. I actually think that's like a good thing, right? Because those games can often take themselves way too seriously. And so there's a blend here that is kind of interesting. And that's probably the headline that you end up pitching to press. I thought the combat was solid. It didn't necessarily innovate, but it didn't feel like it needed to. But also, I played the tutorial, so
I'm sure it opens up later.
There's a lot more that's like there's still a lot more that needs to be done on that, and there's been a lot that's been done since you played it too.
I'm sure, and like when you're playing a tutorial, it's like, okay, here's like your one option, right? And I'm trying to think if there's any other things. Yeah, that was kind of that. Like the main thing that I would have been concerned about was the visual presentation. How do we like sell this as a visual thing? But again, and I think I mentioned this earlier, there's like a lot of successful ugly games. And I'm not saying your game is ugly. I'm not saying you're saying, when I say ugly games, I mean not artist-driven games. Slay the Spire isn't ugly. It's not particularly great art, right? It's not like they have like a team of like 30 artists that were doing it. It's fine. It's serviceable. It's totally like okay art. That's the same way that I felt about Wastenauts. And in terms
I actually like the style of Wastenauts.
I like the comic style and I like the illustrations, but I didn't like the juice, the game feel, the visual polish that we had. We didn't have that, and it felt like in instances messy or things like that. And so when I look at those games, it's like, hell, look at how Kit Fox. Look at how Kit Fox treats Boyfriend Dungeon, which has...
I don't know those games.
Oh my God. Boyfriend Dungeon. So Kit Fox, the publisher. Boyfriend Dungeon is a roguelike dungeon crawler where you can date your weapons. So it's a dating simulator as well. And they have their community manager used to be Victoria Tran, who's now at social game Among Us. And was really, really, really effective at managing the community. Like Blue Up is now going to be hosting the Indie Game Awards are like IGF, and is like generally considered one of like the best indie game community manager promoter people around. One of their games is Boyfriend Dungeon, and it's got these amazing like anime style characters and like their thirst traps and all that kind of stuff, and they're great and they're visual and you love them, and you see a screenshot and you're like, I want to read more. And that shit was on Twitter nonstop. They are also publishing a remake, I think of like a full remake of Dwarven Fortress, and that game's ugly. Right? Dwarven Fortress used to be ASCII art. And they're doing a remake, but it's not particularly like visually that much more attractive. They are not nearly as much active in terms of Twitter. It's much more focused on things like dev blogs to explore like your favorite features from the old one that we're bringing into the new one and things like that, because they don't need to, like, they're not screenshot driven. And so that game has like such a massive following, it's going to do 10 times better than Boyfriend Dungeon. So I think the question is similar for Kids of Karendow, is how do you sell this game without like avenues that are not visually driven? I think a dev blog. Like a really
I do a dev blog, but I haven't posted to it since we started podcasting. This could kind of
Yeah, you could use the podcast as a dev blog kind of thing.
We are going to do more of those featured episodes, but we can't do that every time because there's not enough new information to give every time.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think if there's any others. I would be interested in seeing comps, or what y'all thought were comps. But I would also want to do my own research on actual indie RPGs that are in development.
So it's probably not useful unless you've seen it, but Chained Echoes. Because that's the game I find myself constantly comparing Kids of Karendow to.
I'm gonna look it up.
There are aspects of that game that are visually impressive, but it's not all around. I feel like the trailer shows the best looking parts of the game, and then everything else is kind of on par or maybe a little bit more bland than Karendow. I don't know. That's my opinion. I could be biased. I'm sure I'm biased.
Yeah, it's the same kind of, we're getting a lot of I think there's going to end up being more of a pushback on kind of pixel art for pixel art's sake, especially from consoles, is my understanding. This is all like second and third hand. But and this, you know, seems the same way. I would kind of have the same feedback here, where I would be like, what's the visual story here? Like, what are we trying to do that's like, as compared to, you know, if we're looking at like JRPGs or something like that, as compared to Octopath Traveler. Octopath Traveler,
I did not like Octopath Traveler.
I also struggled. I don't think that I made it more than halfway. I think I barely unlocked all the characters. Yeah. I don't think mechanically it was interesting, but
no, the battle system was boring. I actually didn't like the visuals. Actually, the random fight frequency is far too high. The combat took far too long to finish. It wasn't fun enough, and visually, the blur effect, the bloom effect that they overused everywhere hurt my eyes.
But it made such for such amazing screenshots. It made for such an amazing trailer,
yes,
and
you're right.
And it had a clear artistic. It had something to say visually, not just like, we're doing
2D sprites on a somewhat 3D environment with a lot of blur.
Yeah,
it
had
blur.
something to say. And I think, you know, when I is kind of the same, you know, with Chained Echoes and others. These games are perfectly serviceable pixel art. I think Kids of Karendow also is like totally fine when it comes to pixel art, but it doesn't have something to say visually.
I'm not. You're right. There isn't that extra oomph, if you will.
Yeah.
I'm probably, and I actually was thinking about this like today when I was in the shower.
It's the best time for game dev.
Yeah, I was. It's like, because I was specifically thinking about the overworld, and it's like there needs to be more there. It's not polished enough, because I actually went through recently and actually redid a lot of the parallax effects to make them nicer. Because I'm especially using this forest area in the game as this fog rolls in. So one scene there's a little bit of fog, and the next scene there's more fog, and it's multi-layered and it's moving around, and it's supposed to look kind of cool. And the scene's kind of dark though too, because a lot of areas there are areas of the game that are pretty dark, and maybe that is a bit of a problem. But that was intentional, because I wanted to make it seem like what it actually be. Anyway, I don't know. But
no, I think that there's stuff that you can do, but also I think more to the point is like understand who, like, what is your selling point, and then who's going to be comfortable with that. So you know, when we talked about, and I said, you know, toilet humor in Final Fantasy, the first publisher that comes to mind is Adult Swim, right? Like, there's going to be people who know how to market that, and there's going to be people who have no idea. Like, you know, I mentioned Serenity Forge earlier. They're not going to know what to do with this game because it's like, it's very much like not in their wheelhouse of that demographic of who to market to. And I think that's where you start, rather than trying to like do everything. Like, rather than like, you're sitting here talking about like, I'm going to do this for the art, that for the art. I'm like, fuck it. It doesn't need that. Just figure out what is cool about your game and then lean into that.
Well, you know, I pitched Burgle's Bounty to Adults, but I've never heard back from them, though, because there was some adult humor in Burgle's Bounty. Most of my games kind of have that spin to it.
Yeah, why is that there?
It's my sense of humor.
Yeah, I think knowing, like, you know, where it fits in somebody's like portfolio, and if they know the demographic, is going to be really important as well.
So this has been some phenomenal advice, and I don't even know if I want to ask the last question, because it is, what kind of advice would you give someone? Okay, let's take a spin on that question. What advice would you give yourself now, going back when you first started on Vidar?
Oh boy, get it out faster. Whatever you're working on, do it faster. Do it in half the time. It is more important to have people in your corner than it is to knock it out of the park in the first instance. And it is more likely you will knock it out of the park the more people you have in your corner. And the only way to get those people is by having a goddamn game out there, or several. So whatever it is, just release it. Just go. Do
you think that maybe that's because when it comes to indies, it's also about what they want to achieve out of it, because not all of them are doing it for money. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
a lot of them are because they want to live off of it, but maybe they're not expecting to get rich. So
My advice is totally useless for people who are.
you've
doing
got
this
very
for
good
fun,
business
for
advice. So it's like,
hobbyists.
how do I survive at this?
How do you? Yes. Is put it out earlier, whatever it is, and inherently by going through that process just over and over. Like, I spent 3 or 4 years on, or I spent 3 years on Wastenauts. I spent 2 and change on Vidar. If each of those could have been cut down, or I mean, in all honesty, I was able to get that experience by releasing other games that I was working with, like where I was acting as a producer. But I would have just had like more, right? Even when I applied for this job at Akupara, I applied for a lot of other producer jobs. It was the first time I was actually like applying for a job in the games industry. I had no idea what to expect. Akupara was the only one who even gave me an interview, because I didn't have nearly enough games under my belt, and so nobody was really taking me seriously. And it's just I happened to know Akupara from pitching them Wastenauts, and we had gotten so close. Like they were one of the publishers that we got like the closest to, and just get it out earlier. Just get it out, whatever it is.
Karendow is going to be a few years yet, so that's good advice. Probably not to Gary and I.
Like if you could do it episodically, if you could do something else in the meantime, if you could just like
with what time?
Yeah, I know. It's impossible when you're working a full-time job. But any success that I have had in this industry, which has been pretty minimal, let's be real, I have gotten from being in the same room as other people. And to do that, you have to have a game.
You do.
Yeah, you have to have a game. Like that's the ticket of admission, to get in. It's the price of admission.
All right. Gary, you have anything else you want to ask Dean?
I guess I had one question. It was like, what do you imagine your dream project to be?
Oh boy.
Let's say that time, money wasn't an issue, and not even like IP was an issue. Like you can work with an IP you want, whether it be like somebody else's or your own.
Oh boy. I will say, so I literally can't talk about like anything beyond the fact that I'm doing a pitch right now that involves a popular IP. And it has been really fun to play with, to explore someone else's world and be like, here's the stuff that I want out of this. And get to create in like somebody else's universe. And I am a huge X-Men nerd, like a massive X-Men nerd. I would love to do a project in that universe. Like I would kill for that. So far, I have been very underwhelmed with basically every game that, like Marvel tie-in games that come out.
There's been a couple good X-Men games have come out. No, I haven't played anything recently, but
anything recently. They did the Marvel like Legends 3 or something for Switch. I didn't even go to because it got so panned. I do play Marvel Puzzle Quest on my phone, and I love it. It's a match 3 in Marvel, and it's so far the best Marvel game I've played. I would kill to do some kind of X-Men game. I would kill to do an X-Men MMO.
So much for small projects.
I know. No, only big, only good.
Hey, my question wasn't centered around small or big.
Yeah. No, I would. I do really love like finding hooks where I'm like, oh, what if? Like, what if we pulled at this a little bit more?
Awesome. All right, Dean. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thanks.
Hopefully, you can help us get some more subscribers with that handsome face of yours.
As always.
You're only using him for his body.
Yeah, it would be the first time.
Well, what else would I use him for? His good game development advice.
Yeah, who has that?
All right, Dean, thank you so much again for joining us. And it was great hanging out, and we'll talk to you later.
Yeah,
We'll finally get together in person soon.
absolutely. And have fun on the next session with my former boss.
We'll ask him about you.
on Zelda Singularity. Oh boy. All right.
All right, Dean, thanks a lot and take care.